Guy Benson, what do you make of this show of unity right here? And obviously, are you betting that the budget passes the Senate this week?
Well, on the first question, I think it was a little forced, a little strained, but the fact is they do have mostly the same agenda and they need each other. And firing at each other constantly, especially in one direction, it does no one any good. And McConnell's actually done a lot of heavy lifting on Trump's judges, putting those guys and gals through. In terms of the budget and whether that'll pass, the Republicans, I think, recognize that if they blow it again, they're in huge trouble with their base.
Even the Republicans in the Senate?
And with their donors. And I saw over the last 24 hours names like Bob Corker. There were questions about whether he was going to get on board because of his spat with the president. He says he's inclined to vote for it. Same with Susan Collins, who's been a tough vote to get, especially on health care. So
she says
looking a little bullish, maybe.
She looks like she's going to vote for the budget. Or you think she's going to be there on tax reform, too?
Well,
if she votes yes to the $1.5 trillion in the budget for tax reform, tax cuts,
then I think it's at least looking hopeful for her. And we haven't seen the final bill yet. We don't know what the details are going to look like. I don't think we can forecast whether tax reform will pass because it's not in legislative language yet. But in terms of the vehicle that's necessary to get it to the floor, it looks like the GOP is going to get that done. And if they don't, I mean, it's a total...
You know who else I think they have is Rand Paul. They've got Rand Paul's vote, too.
But again, I think this is the really important point. The first step in this process is passing a budget, which allows them to do a bill with 50 votes instead of 60 votes. But then it's where the details come into play, and the details really matter. There's a lot of disagreement on state and local tax deductions. There's disagreement on estate taxes. There's disagreement on interest deductibility for corporations. There's a lot of moving parts here that people like Mitch McConnell now have to get all in place in order to get a bill to the president's desk.
Can they get this through without eliminating that deduction? I mean, look, this SALT, they call it, state and local tax deduction, it's going to generate $1.3 trillion. That's real money in terms of, you know, paying for this bill. But can they get it through without that deduction?
Well, there's going to be a lot of resistance from senators from wealthy states, right, and high tax states. So that's going to be, I think, a very big sticking point. There are reports that the president blew a gasket behind closed doors when he found out that provision could result in higher taxes for some middle-class, upper-middle-class families.
Of course it is.
And so that would be a non-starter based on what we've heard in terms of the rhetoric from the White House. But if you get rid of that, there's a huge hole blown in how you pay for the whole thing.
Right. So what's the fix? And you can't say, oh, we're just going to not do the estate tax, because the estate tax is not generating the kind of revenue that the state and local.
The estate tax is part of it, though. There's hundreds of billions there over 10 years. But the fix is you just can't go as low on rates as you want it to go. For instance, you can't bring the top rate down from 39.6%
to 35.
So you know, if the number in the budget is $1.5 trillion over 10 years, that's the number they have to work with. If they can't get $1.3 trillion out of state and local taxes, there's going to have to be some give somewhere else.
Yeah, so that's the beauty of our president. He's a master negotiator. You come in with really high expectations and meet somewhere in the middle. So maybe he's trying to swing.
Well, we'll see. But John makes the right point. It's $1.5 trillion. That's what they've got. That's the number. That's in the budget.
Well, the House doesn't even have that big a number. So they have to agree first on how big that number is.
I think they agreed on the $1.5 trillion. I mean, that's the number. The House will have to go along with it. Let me turn to other news out of Washington, because the FBI is now saying that former Director James Comey began drafting a statement about concluding the Clinton email investigation months before even interviewing her. Now, Guy, we knew this, really. We assumed this. What do you make of these revelations? I mean, he had his decision before anything, before the evidence was presented and before the interview.
This came out a couple months ago. This is just more evidence to that effect, that it looks like Comey and the FBI decided they were going to give her a pass legally on this before she was interviewed, before key players in the scandal were interviewed. Comey said, oh, there was no criminal intent, which is why we're not recommending charges. I think you can make a clear case for intent, and the statute didn't require intent, given the crimes that she committed, although the FBI would disagree. To me, Comey has to come back before Congress and testify again and explain himself, because he's testified there all over the place. We've seen him a bunch. This is new information. We haven't heard from him under oath since it came out. I want to hear why he made these decisions in the order that he did, because from where I sit, based on the information that we have, it looks indefensible, and it looks, to use a phrase that was used a lot during the campaign, a little rigged.
Yeah, rigged. And by the way, this was this before Loretta Lynch instructed her underling, Jim Comey, to call it a matter and not an investigation, even though it was a criminal investigation?
Which he went along with for a little while.
Which he went along with.
And then eventually backed off of it. He's testified about that. So Lindsey Graham's been really beating the drum on this, and he's right. We have more information. You cannot come to your conclusion before all the evidence is in. Key evidence, key witnesses interviewed. Bring him back under oath.
Yet we still have a Russia investigation going on with no fruits of that labor.
Right. Well, that's true.
So the irony is thick.
Yeah, it's true.
Although that's an important investigation, too. Like, that should go on. I want to see what Mueller comes up with. But there's another side of this. If we have a politicized FBI, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're saying his firing was justified?
Yeah, you can absolutely make the case that the firing was justified. The way the White House did it, their explanations kept changing. Trump bragging to the Russians in the Oval Office about firing a nut job, that was all bad. On the merits, taking away the mess around it from the White House and their handling of it, on the merits, firing him was justified.
Yeah, and by the way, he did make the decision before that meeting on the tarmac as well, with Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch as well. We should say that President Trump yesterday tweeted that he hopes Hillary Clinton runs again in 2020. As Hillary Clinton herself told an Australian media outlet that former FBI Director Jim Comey gave her the shiv.
What's a shiv?
It's a thing you stab. I don't like a
like in prison.
You make it in prison.
You get shivved in prison with like a makeshift knife.
Yes.
Oh, I had not heard that.
Yes, all my time on the inside, I know these things. It's mostly just watching Law and Order. But this is just such a pathetic ritual now from this woman, making excuses constantly for why she lost. I was tough on Jim Comey 2 seconds ago. There was new information in the investigation. He notified Congress that they were looking into it. Who shivved Hillary Clinton was Hillary Clinton by setting up an improper, illegal server and lying about it constantly.
You mean it wasn't Nigel Farage? That was yesterday's reason.
I don't think Democrats would be thrilled with a Hillary campaign in 2020. They clearly need to move
Third time's the charm, baby.
Would she really think to run again?
Does she have the stamina? There's no way she's got the
stamina.
stamina.
I don't know about stamina, but in her head, does she really think that the Dems want her to run?
Sure. I think when you have that much power and prominence for as long as you do, it's clear that she's wanted to be president since she was, a fetus, and that dream dies very hard. And if she's still out there and, selling books and making big speeches and has donor buddies, not Weinstein anymore, but others, she might think the party needs me. She's talking, well, maybe she's not going to run, but I think if she sees an opening, it'll be awfully tempting for her.
She wrote the book, What Happened? Right? So there you go. We know what happened.